Hey, it's Next Up. Wendy, Wiese, Alvin, Reid. Hope you enjoyed the previous show. We sure did. We're joined by Dr. Peter Wyse Jackson this evening. He's president of the Missouri Botanical Gardens, and just a lovely spring day. I can hear the things in my backyard just growing, getting ready for like takeover as they usually do in the spring. But Dr. Jackson, I want to start out with a kind of serious question for you. Four-leaf clovers. Now, are they really that rare? I mean, are we talking 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000? I've always wondered. So on this St. Patrick's Day, let's answer that one to start off.
Well, you see, what I could do is duck that question because four-leaf clover really has nothing to do with St. Patrick's Day.
All right.
because the shamrock has to have 3 leaflets.
Okay.
Because it represents the Holy Trinity. So if you put a 4th one into the mix, I don't know where that fits in. Possibly that accounts for St. Patrick. You do find 4-leaved clovers quite commonly, but I always think when I see it associated with St. Patrick's Day that it's absolutely the wrong thing to have there.
All right, well, I'll pass that on.
Well, and we have also learned, Dr. Wyse Jackson, that there were no snakes in Ireland for St. Patrick to drive out. Is that true? You would know better than anybody else.
Well, when all the ice melted after the Ice Age, Ireland got pretty much cut off from mainland Europe before the snakes managed to get there. They slithered their way up through northern Europe and got as far as Britain, but never made it into Ireland. So, but maybe St. Patrick banished them. Who knows?
We believe, but there is also, and before we get into the program, we did want to ask you, there is a really interesting connection between you and this program, correct? Donnybrook.
Well, yes, indeed. Well, of course, I watch Donnybrook religiously every week, but I used to live in Donnybrook.
Wow.
And as I know you know, it's a wonderful word, Donnybrook. It means a free-for-all, a brawl. And it was named after the Donnybrook Fair, which is now a very fashionable suburb of Dublin, but was very notorious for several centuries for having a really wild fair. Where there was lots of drinking and lots of fighting. And it was so bad that in 1855 or thereabouts, it was banned. But the name lived on as being really a free-for-all.
The town endured. Did they make Ray Hartman live on the outskirts of town? Was that something that they had to do in Donnybrook, Ireland as well?
Well, I must say the Donnybrook, PBS Donnybrook, is very much more civilized than that Donnybrook Fair ever was.
That's saying quite a lot.
All right. Well, Dr. Jackson, we have a Donnybrook in the United States of America right now in regard to climate control and what we're doing to our planet. And, you know, in your job and what you see, you could probably recite chapter and verse exactly why we are damaging our plant life. If you had to be succinct and just try to explain it to those who don't believe in, you know, like 100 words or less, what would you say?
We take plants for granted. We don't know, many people don't know that there are 400,000 different plant species on the planet, and about 1/3 of them are currently in danger of extinction. Because we are destroying their habitats, they're being lost as a result of climate change, invasive species, and so on. And we take them for granted when we forget that all life relies on plants. There would be no life on the planet if we didn't have our plants. When you think of their 101 uses for them, 1,001 uses for food, for medicine, for fibers, for timbers, for the basis of all terrestrial habitats. They are what keeps the planet going.
Could you talk about a few more of those uses, maybe that those of us who are not specialists don't know about when it comes to plants and their importance to us?
Well, if you think about plants for medical purposes, when you go to many parts of the world, if you go to China, traditional Chinese medicine uses 13,000 different plant species. India uses about 8,000 different plant species in Ayurvedic traditional medicine. But even we use so many medicines for modern purposes that are actually derived from plants. One of the great treatments for cancer is the use of Taxol, and that was extracted from Pacific yew trees, Taxus brevifolia, and only in 1983 did they start to do clinical trials. And where would we be without having Taxol for the effective treatment of so many cancers?
Dr. Wyse Jackson, are we beginning to see in any areas a deterioration that is noticeable when it comes to the plant world and climate change?
Oh, we are, yes, and it's a complex series of reasons, because in some cases the plants are being attacked by invasive species that are spreading because their climate is changing. We're losing pollinators who may be adapted to a slightly different climate. We're seeing plants perhaps unable to reproduce successfully. We're seeing different changes in terms of the warmer summers and colder winters, and so it's the response of plants to climate change is a really complex area that is now really an important area for research in so many botanical institutions, including the Missouri Botanical Garden.
And Dr. Jackson, of those third, plant species that are endangered, as you said, worldwide, I'm sure that you have some of them there on your site. And does that frighten you sometimes, where you think to yourself that a day really could come where the only place you will see this plant is in some place like the Missouri Botanical Garden? One, it's sad, but is it kind of frightening to you?
It is, and the worry is that there will be so many species that will disappear into extinction without even being in a botanical garden. We have about 17,500 different plant species and varieties in the living collections of the Missouri Botanical Garden today. And of those, 1,500 of them are rare or endangered in the world and are part of our conservation collections. I was just looking at one of them today, which is possibly the rarest plant in the world. There was, until recently, one seedling of the species left. And we have found only on the little Pacific island of Pitcairn, where it had almost completely been eradicated and has been propagated from seed. And we have 2 young plants of it now growing in the Missouri Botanical Garden, and will go on display in the Climatron before too long. And there are far too many stories like that of plants on the edge. But it does really hearten me that botanic gardens around the world have really taken on a primary task to make sure that there is really no reason why any plant species should disappear entirely if botanic gardens are doing their job properly.
You surprised me there, because when you described those 2 plants, I thought your next words were going to see, like, now you all will never see them because no, they're too endangered. But that's wonderful that I guess that's what you're there for, kind of, is for us to see things that are not only disappearing, which we don't see all the time. And I would imagine that of the visitors you get, maybe unlike the zoo, maybe unlike the Arch, some of the other St. Louis attractions, people still get to the Missouri Botanical Garden and say, like, wow, this is really cool. There's a lot here. I bet you still get that, especially from younger people.
We do from all ages, because it is the Missouri Botanical Garden is one of the world-leading botanical gardens. It's an extraordinary institution and really has provided a model for so much work in botanic gardens around the world. And we really want to share our mission to save plants and make people aware of their importance with with all of the multitude of people who come to the garden, not only just to enjoy the beauty of the garden, but to appreciate how plants are what make us.
This is such an important discussion to be having with you in terms of the Missouri Botanical Garden, but as an Irishman on St. Patrick's Day, there is a preconceived notion, cultural, I don't know whether it's accurate or not, but that the Irish do have this incredible love for the land and love of the land. Who introduced you, Dr. Wyse Jackson, to the importance and the beauty of the natural world? And then a second part of that question, how do we continue that love of and love for the natural world in our children when so many of our children don't live anywhere near the natural world, if you know what I mean?
I think that, I was fortunate. I had a wonderful teacher in my secondary school who knew all of the names of Irish plants. And I said to him one day, I really can't identify all of these. And he suggested that I should try to identify one plant every day. And I would never forget it. And learned them that way. And I did that. There are 400,000 of them to go. So it's going to take me a little bit longer. But I found that there was infinite curiosity to be satisfied, and I enjoyed growing plants and getting out into nature and looking at them and hearing the stories about them. I love exploring the use of plants. I collect dandelions every year and use them in the kitchen for a multitude of purposes. They make really good salads. I make honey out of by boiling the flowers. I grind up the roots to make coffee, and those are the sorts of things that really connect me to plants. And I think that there are things that can get young people involved. And we try to spread that sort of love and interest in the botanical garden for people to come in and say that they're not just green things, they have a story to tell.
Well, if you need to find some dandelions this summer, I know where you can find them. Well, let's pick up the story from, maybe from your youth and time in Donnybrook. Like, where did you do your educational years, and what brought you to the United States of America?
I studied in Trinity College, Dublin, and then became the curator of their little university botanic garden. And a few years after that, I was invited to go to London to help set up a worldwide network of botanic gardens that is the sort of United Nations for botanic gardens. And I spent about 20 years in that, and then went back to be the director of the National Botanic Gardens, which I thought was my last job. And then I got a call one day saying, would I be interested in coming to the Missouri Botanical Garden, where the great Peter Raven was president and was on the point of retiring. And I said, me? Really? And anyway, I came and I knew the Missouri Botanical Garden for many years as one of the great leaders, botanical leaders in the world. And I was thrilled to come across the Atlantic and to find that it absolutely lived up to my expectations. And I've spent very, very happy 12 years so far. Many more to go, I hope.
Many more, absolutely. So there is a network. You do feel connected to your colleagues around the world when it comes to botanical gardens. And forgive us for being uninitiated, but would the Missouri Botanical Garden be known around the world among your colleagues for one particular thing, and then other gardens around the world for their own particular attributes? Is that how it works, Dr. Wyse Jackson?
Well, when I first started my career, there were about 750 botanic gardens in the world. There are now over 3,000.
Wow.
So it's been an amazing period over the last few decades of growth in botanic gardens, being often created as a result of the need for conservation, the need for cities to have botanic gardens and really provide a place where young people and everyone can go to experience nature. And that really has been a key part of creating the network. They have shared policies. I'm fortunate. I think I've got friends in 100 countries now in botanic gardens, and we do work so closely together to share ideas and to share plants too, and to make sure that the research we do is filling in the gaps. The conservation we do is filling in the gaps of things that would otherwise be overlooked.
And had you visited the Missouri Botanical Garden before you came over and first interviewed for the job?
I had, yes, indeed. I'd been to the International Botanical Congress, which was here in 1999. Okay. So I wasn't surprised.
So I was just going to say, because were you surprised kind of where it is? I mean, it's in the city. It is not on the outskirts. It is not in suburbia. It's in the city, which is, also kind of a neat thing too.
Well, but it's a product of St. Louis. I mean, the strength of the Missouri Botanical Garden is the fact that it's been created and sustained by St. Louis, which is remarkable. St. Louis is not a capital city, but the other world-leading botanic gardens are by and large in capital cities. So St. Louis should be very, very proud. I mean, look at, for example, the new Jack C. Taylor Visitor Center that we're building at the moment, and that is entirely the product of contributions made by generous people in St. Louis.
And if we're not mistaken, Dr. Wyse Jackson, wasn't in its inception, the Missouri Botanical Garden was actually considered to be Henry Shaw in terms. It was the country, was it not? I mean, it was considered the rural area around St. Louis, that's the part that always surprises me.
And it was, yes, indeed. It was, I think Henry Shaw, when he went from his townhouse downtown, it would take him the morning in his carriage to get to his property out at what became Tower Grove. And it was prairie.
Yeah, yeah. What other things are happening at the Botanical Garden?
Well, it's going to be an exciting year at the Botanical Garden, because we all hope, we knock on wood, that the pandemic is going to allow us to resume so many different things. I mean, next month, people will want to come in and see. We'll have about 40,000 tulips in bloom, so it's going to be beautiful, and all of the spring flowers. And we all need a chance to get out in the spring and refresh ourselves after the winter. The cherries, the prunus, will be in bloom around the Japanese garden. We've got Chinese Culture Days coming up in May as well, where people can come in and follow the 70-foot-long Chinese dragon as it parades through the garden, and watch the Tai Chi and enjoy the Chinese food and tour the Chinese garden. We've got the Whittaker music series starting up again on the 1st of June. We'll have 10 concerts in the garden until between the 1st of June and the 3rd of August, with 10 wonderful groups coming into play, give us a sense that life is going to return to the way we want it to be.
And when you look
and
at
then we'll be opening the new visitor center at the end of August as well. And that's going to be an amazing building with so many new features and a wonderful way for visitors to become introduced and enjoy the garden in new ways.
Well, you mentioned the pandemic, and I mean, my guess is that plants don't know that there was a pandemic, but they probably noticed that a lot more people were doing stuff outside. Did you experience that people just, especially a couple years ago or a year and a half ago, they just had to get out of the house? All right, they didn't want to be inside, but they wanted to be outside. And people all of a sudden discovered there was an outside again. So I guess a lot of people found their way to the Missouri Botanical Garden.
They did, and they also found their way to the garden virtually as well.
Good point.
Last year we had 10 million virtual visitors to our website. We've got a science database online, and that had 96 million hits to it.
Wow.
So it was, we found that we couldn't have people coming to the garden in person, but we could certainly get them online in many cases. We found the numbers of people who were sending us questions about their own home gardens. I think we answered 10,000 questions from potential visitors about how we could give them advice on their home gardens. And there are many gardens that will be looking wonderful after the pandemic that had been neglected for years, I suspect.
We were talking about the hundreds of thousands of species of plants. Can you share with us I know there is a spiritual and cultural significance when it comes to so many of these plants. Can you think of any just right off the top of your head, Dr. Wyse Jackson, at the Missouri Botanical Garden with that spiritual and cultural significance?
Well, I often think when I think about plants and culture, I return in some ways to my Irish roots, and I think about the potato, the modest potato. And if you think that the United States was transformed as a result of the potato. During the Great Potato Famine in the 1840s in Ireland, a tragic change of the history for Ireland, where 1 million people died of starvation. But 1.5 million people came to the United States as a result of the potato blight, which wiped out the potato. A third before the famine, there was a third of the population living off potatoes. Just, I mean, a good healthy man like me, before the potato famine in Ireland, was eating 14 pounds of potatoes a day, and probably nothing else. That's about 65 potatoes. One will do me now. But it is extraordinary to think about the cultural stories and importance of something like the modest potato. You know, starting out life in the Andes with the Incas, being brought to Europe, possibly to Spain in the mid-1500s, and then becoming the staple food for so many people in Ireland. There are these extraordinary stories that one can tell about plants, and also so many interesting artifacts and objects relating to them that tell their stories as well. And I love going around antique stores in St. Louis and seeing what I can find, that objects that relate to plants and their use, which is part of the cultural attraction too.
I have to ask you if you're a Cardinal fan.
You mean the red ones that fly around the garden?
Well, I know you're one. I know you're fans of the Cardinals that fly, but the Cardinals that. And how excited are you about European football coming to town?
That is that would be most exciting. I've watched a lot of the Cardinals, and I still try to compare it with cricket and the rules, and it doesn't work when you do that.
No,
so
it doesn't.
My eldest son is a great fan of British football and follows Brentford, which when he started as an 8-year-old was down in the lowest divisions, and they're now in the Premiership. So he's thrilled. It only took him 20 years of many defeats to get them to that level, and I have to follow soccer as well.
Wonderful.
And rugby too.
Dr. Wyse Jackson, in our last minute, okay, we're all going to go home. What can I do? What can Wendy do to help preserve plants, like in our own backyard, our own front yards?
Come in and visit the Botanical Garden. Get to know and appreciate the plants. Continue to do the sort of wonderful things you do, spreading the word about the importance of the environment and the importance of us actually looking at things and saying, what can we do individually in our own lives to change the way we treat our environment and live sustainably within it? Can we bring more green into the city? Absolutely we can. We need to do that. And it will only happen if we are each one playing our part.
Well, the gardens are a long treasured tradition here in the St. Louis area. Dr. Wyse Jackson, we thank you so very much for making time on this important day for our Donnybrook viewers. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And I have my genuine Irish shamrock on
Oh,
tonight.
yeah. Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for clarifying that for me. And thank you guys for watching tonight on Next Up. We'll see you next week.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.